So hello everybody, welcome to this live chat where I'm going to be talking about what helped me go from not being able to walk for 1 minute, not being able to talk at times, to being able to work full time, play sport again, live an active life. So if you are watching me live, do say hello, let me know you can see me and hear me. Just pop a message in the chat, that would be great. If you're watching the replay, just put hashtag replay. So if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to talk about the approaches that helped me most. And one of the key things was mind-body approaches. Now, just to be really clear, I do believe that ME, CFS, fibromyalgia, long COVID and related conditions are real conditions. Okay, just to make that absolutely clear. And at the end of this video, I'll tell you how you can access a free resource that I found super helpful. So, my name is Simon Pimenta. I create videos and resources to help people with ME, CFS, fibromyalgia, long COVID. So do check out my channel. If you like this video, do subscribe, hit the notification button, and check out the playlists where I've created videos on a number of topics, including dealing with setbacks, how to approach movement in a sustainable way, how to deal with anxiety, etc. So do check those out. So, sorry, my slides have frozen for a moment. So I went off sick in 1997 and I didn't go back to work until 2006. My issues started before 1997. I took on a management job, and before that I'd been fairly healthy, active person. I played a lot of sport, football, tennis. I used to cycle to work, which is about 6 or 7 miles, then go and play football, then cycle to my girlfriend's, which was up a big hill, and then cycle home up another big hill. But when I took on the management job, it was a stressful job, and over a period of 2 or 3 years, my health deteriorated. I got more and more tired. I remember being at a wedding and going to bed about 10 o'clock, which was unheard of. Thea says I was watching the wrong one, no problem. The final straw is I remember going to a friend's house. It was November, I think, and the house was pretty cold and I got a bit of a chill. I sat there feeling cold without saying to her, look, actually, can you turn the heating up or can I have a jumper? And that was the start of 8 years of not working. Incidentally, I was actually at that friend's house recently, and her dining room is kind of in the conservatory, and it was a bit chilly, and I just said, right, I need to get a jumper, and can you turn the heating on? And I was fine. All right, that was 27 years after that incident that resulted in me going off sick. But that wasn't the primary cause. The primary cause is that I was already very run down. Okay, so there are kind of 3 phases to my story. First phase is when I first got sick, I was bedbound. I was sleeping, resting 18 hours a day. Had many symptoms, constant sore throats, infections, digestive issues. I was sensitive to food. I was reacting to sugar, yeast, wheat. I had mental and physical fatigue, brain fog, lightheadedness, pain. I felt feverish a lot of the time, had recurring flu-like symptoms. Someone said to me recently, I have constant flus, and I suddenly remembered, oh yeah, I had that. I was very sensitive to cold, not so much hot. I was born in a hot country, so the hot doesn't bother me too much, but I was really sensitive to cold. I could, if I went outside without a coat on just for a couple of minutes, it could give me chills that lasted all night into the next day. I was very sensitive to light and smells. Right now, I've got 2 lights shining in my eyes. They don't really bother me. I experienced post-exertional malaise. So, I couldn't do activity without payback. I had sleep disturbances. I was awake a lot. I had heart palpitations. As I say, at times I couldn't talk due to the fatigue. And my main tool at that point was resting and sleeping. Okay, so that's the first phase. The second phase is when I was feeling well enough to be able to start exploring what might help recovery. I was able to leave the house. I went to the ME unit at the infamous King's College. It's infamous because it was run by Professor Simon Wesley, who's a very controversial figure in the ME community. I did see a psychiatrist, which at the time was very uncomfortable because it was almost like implying that this was all in my head, and I knew it wasn't. It was a very real physical condition, but he was a very nice chap. But I got the clear feeling that they weren't taking an integrated approach. When I asked them about Candida and leaky gut, which were things that had been diagnosed, they kind of dismissed them, and I just felt like they said we had no evidence that they are an issue. And I thought, well, you haven't asked me any questions to identify whether it's an issue. Okay, so I was offered Prozac. I'd already done my own research. I'd posted in the Action for ME newsletter magazine, has anyone taken Prozac? I got about 60 replies. 2/3 of them said I had to stop taking it after a short period of time due to the side effects, and the other third of people were saying I'm on it, and they found it helpful. Okay, and also that actually tallied with the licensing trial. This was published in the Guardian newspaper, a British newspaper, that in the licensing trial, 2/3 of the people dropped out because of the side effects. So the results that they presented were based on the third of the people who could tolerate the results. So I decided to decline taking Prozac. I was also offered cognitive behavioural therapy. Given that I declined the Prozac, I kind of felt I should say yes to CBT, but I was open to it. I found it interesting. The people I saw 2 psychologists. They were very nice. They told me I needed to deal with the stress, but they didn't really give me tools to help me do that. One of them did say, you don't seem to have a sense of urgency about recovery. I didn't really understand what he meant, and he didn't really tell me how to fix that. So I didn't think that was particularly helpful. Okay, so I explored other solutions. Some were quite passive. They were done to me, approaches. For instance, I saw a doctor trained in nutritional medicine. He identified Candida, which is a yeast overgrowth, and that made sense because I was experiencing acidity, and as I read up about it, I discovered that acidity was one of the side effects. And Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum recommends that everyone with ME/CFS fibromyalgia, follow a Candida protocol. I have created a PDF on that, so if you'd like that, comment Candida below, and I will pop the link to you. All right. I also followed the leaky gut protocol, which was helpful because as a result, I was able to tolerate exercise better, but I still wasn't well. Okay, so I explored nutritional approaches. I cut out sugar, dairy. I could have yogurt. I cut out yeast, which was quite tough because I like my alcohol. But actually, every time I drank beer, I felt horrible. So that was relatively easy to do. I was suggested I cut out wheat, so I cut out bread, which I love my bread, so that was quite challenging. Again, did all those things. I did have a super healthy diet, but I still wasn't well. I also then saw herbalists, nutritionists. I had acupuncture, which kind of made me slow down, and I felt better for a little bit, but then within a few days felt not so good again. Had cranial osteopathy, even tried colonics, Chinese herbs, which were strong tasting. I didn't mind the strong taste, but they were quite smelly. But then I also did things which were more about me being proactive. For instance, doing yoga, doing meditation. In fact, I started doing yoga when I was a kid. But in 2005, so this was 9 years later, I was still pretty sensitive. I remember going on holiday with a friend, and if I chatted for 15 minutes too long, I would have to go and rest and feel extremely exhausted. On the last day of the holiday, I remember I was well enough for us to go for a bike ride. So, that my health was fluctuating, but as I say, I was still pretty prone to getting tired out. So that was phase 2. Phase 3 started within a couple of weeks of me returning from that holiday in 2005, because that's when I really started exploring mind-body approaches at a new level. Okay, I was already doing the meditation, but I did a brain training program. I went on to be a practitioner of this program. According to my contract, I'm not supposed to mention the name of that program, but the first word begins, 2 words, first word begins with frightening. Okay, so you might guess what that approach is. It did give me a strong sense that recovery was possible. I was already in general hopeful that I was going to recover and optimistic, but it really helped me understand the mind-body connection. And the goal of the approach was to identify the stressors and interrupt the stressors. So I learned a stop process. Now, for me, using the stop process, it was always gentle. Okay, sometimes I chat to people and I ask them to show me how they, they've done a brain training program, and I ask them to show me how they use their techniques. And the way they say stop is quite stressful. And so I teach them to do it in a much gentler way. And every person has said, wow, that feels very different. And so for some people, though, that kind of stop was not a good approach. And I'll say more about that soon. So it was really useful, but I did have to tailor what I learned. And I really encourage you, whatever program you do, whatever coach or practitioner you speak to, always use your judgment, okay? Your nervous system knows when you don't feel safe. So if someone says something to you that doesn't feel right, I encourage you to ignore it, and feel free, if you like, to send me a question. So Thea says, I did the lightning process, it ruined me. Sorry to hear that, for several days. Okay. Well, here's the thing. One of the things that sometimes people are told when they do these certain programs, they're told, you've done this course, go out and act like a normal, healthy person. Now, I wasn't a normal, healthy person by the time I finished that program. So if I'd kind of taken that advice and pushed myself, that would not have resulted in a good outcome. And I've spoken to people who said that's what they were told, and they relapsed. Okay. And it's not something I tell people. When I first start chatting to someone, I find out where they are. Okay. And we build on that. We identify the next step. So it's a very tailored approach. Okay. So that was the first thing I had to do, is ignore what didn't feel like a good fit for me. Okay. The next thing I needed to do was to add some elements. Okay. So one of the things about saying stop to a behavior, an emotion, a thought, is that it doesn't always result in us understanding the patterns we're running. Okay. So, for instance, our emotions give us important information. As I mentioned, if your nervous system is telling you don't feel comfortable, feel safe, that's important information, and we need to make sense of that. Now, the body doesn't communicate in ways that are easy to understand, so it's not always a linear process of understanding what our emotions are telling us, but we can learn to get better at listening to and responding to those cues. So Thea says, the woman got angry with me for not being suddenly well and told my brother I wasn't trying. Very sorry to hear that. That's the kind of thing that makes me cross, all right, because I don't think that's appropriate. Blaming a client is not very helpful. It's not very professional. Okay. Marie says, Candida. Okay, I will post that. So, as I say, yeah, learning to process emotions is important. Our emotions give us important information. So it's important to learn how to make sense of them. It's important to understand the link between our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings, our thoughts generating feelings, because there's a difference between emotions that come from our emotional brain and thought-generated emotions or feelings and our behaviors. Okay, so I also felt that I needed to develop, and I needed to help people develop their critical thinking skills. So one element of that is learning how to reframe things. So this is the ability to see things in more useful ways. Okay, an example of that is if I have a dip, I could catastrophize. I might recognize that's just going to slow down my recovery if I'm catastrophizing because I'm generating stress. And it might be more helpful to recognize that it's okay to be human. Maybe if I have overdone it, I can forgive myself. I can be patient. I can be accepting. I can be compassionate. I can have a sense of trust. So if you'd like the Reframing PDF, comment reframing. Okay. Now, the second critical thinking skill that I kind of developed over time was, it's called reappraisal. Okay, this is going deeper than reframing, where we ask some simple but powerful questions. And funnily enough, I was reading Mark Brackett's book called Permission to Feel today, and I thought I just need to read that last chapter. And he was talking about when we are able to reappraise things, it dampens the activity in the amygdala, which is the area that gets activated when we experience strong emotions. And reappraisal instead activates the part of the brain that helps us modulate our emotional responses. And as I mentioned, for some people, saying stop wasn't a good fit, partly because some people were saying it in a very stressful way. And some of my brilliant clients were attuned enough to recognize that their nervous system was telling them that this wasn't a good fit for them. And this is where, I love working with people because I learn from my clients, okay? And as I say, your nervous system tells you when you don't feel safe. So it's important to listen to that. So Stephen says, I'm working through an online program at the moment. I'm looking upon it as the first step and not the end of the story. That's a good philosophical approach, Stephen. So some people felt like saying stop was a bit like saying stop to their inner child. Okay, so I realized I needed to kind of develop a process which is about learning to make space for that part of you that maybe some people call it the inner child. It might be another part. And, learning to understand these different parts of myself, the people pleaser, I didn't think I was a perfectionist, but I realized that does show up in certain ways. Okay, so there were other patterns that I really needed to get to know. All right, and that's what we can learn to do by recognizing there's a part of us that has the capacity for wisdom. That part can take care of these other parts that are doing behaviors that ultimately limit us in some way. They are survival strategies, and that is that part of us trying to do its best for us, okay? But we can learn to get to know those parts. And there's a coaching principle called pacing and leading. Pacing is where you walk alongside, okay? So you walk alongside that part of you make space for it, you listen to it, you acknowledge it, okay? And when that part of us feels heard, then often people say, I feel more relaxed. I feel calmer. I've literally had some sessions this week doing this process with people. And people say, yeah, I feel more relaxed now. Okay. And once that part of us feels heard, that part is more receptive to being led. So, for example, if you think about a young child who's scared about monsters under the bed, just saying, no, there aren't any monsters is not going to help. Listening to that child, making them feel heard and cared for, is going to calm their physiology. They're going to experience co-regulation through your calmness, okay? And then once they've got into that state, they're more receptive to being led. There's a hypnotherapist who says, who's your favorite superhero. And they'll say, whoever it is, Spider-Man. And they say, okay, let's imagine Spider-Man is here to protect you, all right? And they're going to catch that monster, wrap it up in a web and take it away, all right? So that's a strategy that, you know, is really helpful to help people regulate their nervous system. As a result of all these tweaks, I started to make progress. I was able to tolerate more. I remember going to a wedding and I was up from 11 in the morning till 1 at night without rest. I remember feeling a little bit of a tiredness at a certain point. I went and sat down for 5 minutes and I felt okay. I remember playing badminton for the first time for 3 hours. I was stiff for the next few days, but I was able to play again soon after. Okay. As I said, I was able to train as a practitioner and I started working full-time, working at the clinic. So let's just see, there's a couple more comments. Yeah, so Stephen says, that way I don't set my expectation too sky high. That's you know, got to find, as I said earlier, we've got to find an approach that feels right for us, okay? Marie says, I've been trying a certain program for a while. I sometimes feel just too American for my Scandinavian personality. So mostly I keep laughing, but happy is a good thing. Yeah, the question is, if it helps when I find myself being silly, I do like the concept, so I will try once more and work all the way through the material. That's perfect, Maria. I think the key there is if you feel, and funnily enough, that's exactly what I said when I did this program. I said, it feels a bit American. And the trainer said, okay, then you have to make it your own. So if that's how you make it your own, Maria, you know, by bringing your humor to it, then that's great. As long as what you're doing is powerful and congruent, okay? Certainly I'd recommend people, you know, adapt things in a way that feels like a good fit. So for instance, as I say, some clients, instead of saying stop, they put their hand on their heart and say, I am with you. I see you. I hear you. So this is about being flexible, all right? And this is one of the things I teach people. Part of my job is helping people spot when they're not being flexible and teaching them how to approach things in a more flexible way. So Stephen and Maria just gave lovely examples of that. So Liam says, I've done a lot of therapy type of things for CFS, and each time I've done them, I've crashed. They seem to tell me to not be bored and do more in life, but each time I totally crash. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, Liam. You know, here's the thing. For me, you know, I hear, in fact, I made a video about this, so do check that out. And I asked the question, do symptoms mean we need to rest? And there's kind of 3 responses to that. 1, we might need to rest. Okay. 2, there might be times when we need to tend to the emotional brain. The emotional brain is generating symptoms to get us to listen and take appropriate action. Okay. And it might be there are times when we need to process those emotions. There might be times where we need some stimulation, some fun. Okay. But for example, if someone's very fragile, they might just do a little bit of that. And so there's 3 responses, okay? And, you know, I've heard that, you know, I've been heard of therapies which say, oh, you know, you need to just go out and have fun. There are times when that was just not possible. I did not have the energy to do that. What I needed was someone to say, look, you are going to get better, number 1. Number 2, let's talk about what's going on emotionally, because I was carrying a lot of emotions, okay? I hadn't yet learned, even though I was a counsellor, how to fully process my emotions, okay? And it was only by starting to do that, then the option of then being able to do some fun stuff became available to me. And still, I had to use my judgment. I had to listen to my body, because I thought, okay, I'm doing some fun stuff, so that should be good. And then I'd keep doing it for too long, and then I would feel worse again. All right. So if you'd like the reframing PDF, just comment reframing below. I'd love to know what your key takeaway is from what I've shared. I've talked for about 25 minutes, so now's probably a good time to stop. One of the things I realized when I started just thinking about delivering this is there were things I realized with the benefit of hindsight that I could have done to help things move along more quickly. All right. And I've touched a little bit on them on some of them in this video, but I will talk about this next week, same time, same place. So if you're interested, do join me. As I say, I've created lots of free resources, so check out my channel on YouTube. Create lots of playlists. If you do want help, I offer one-to-one coaching. I offer group coaching. We meet weekly. There's 2 sessions each week, and this is a nice little community which is very supportive. It's by donation. I try and make it as accessible to everybody as possible. It's based on an honesty policy. So if you're interested to know more about that, then just get in touch. I also run a 12-week course called Building Resilience. I'm going to be starting a new course in April. So if you'd like some information about that, and I'm thinking of doing something quite radical. So if you'd like to know more, get in touch. If you've got any questions, comment below, tag me if you can, and I will do my best to answer them. Okay, so thanks everybody for watching. Maybe we'll end with a brief relaxation. Okay, so Thea says, I'm interested in how to start physical movement for strength. So Thea, I have made a video about that, so do check that out. Have a look on I can see you're watching on Facebook, but if you have a look on my YouTube channel, then you can do a search, or you can look at the movement playlist, and I think I've put it there. I've made a video specifically for people who, have low activity levels, how they can build up their activity. So do check that out, all right? But let's end with a very brief relaxation. So I invite you to close your eyes. Obviously, only close your eyes if it's safe to do so. And I invite you to breathe in through your nose, as long as that's comfortable, into your belly, and breathe out of your nose. And as you breathe in and out, just allow your out breath to be a little longer than your in breath. I invite you to consider that you do have this part of you that has the capacity to make decisions that support you. For example, that part of you can make the decision just to pause from time to time, to close your eyes, maybe to put your hands on your heart, or one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. And if it's comfortable, just to breathe, to focus on your breath, imagining your breath as a colour, breathing in that colour. Imagine it spreading into your whole body. And as you breathe out, just letting go of anything that doesn't serve you. As you breathe in, just imagine taking in that oxygen which gets circulated around your body, along with the nutrients in your blood, nourishing the parts of the body that need it most. You might imagine, as you breathe in and out, that colour swirling round you gently, slowly, just enveloping you. In that sensation of being present. I invite you to consider that you can just take these moments whenever you choose. And in doing so, you're just helping to regulate your nervous system. If you like, you can just continue with your eyes closed. Or if you're ready, you can open them now. If not, just enjoy those feelings of relaxation. Continue to allow yourself to relax. Bringing yourself back when you're ready. So thanks everybody for your participation. Nice to see some familiar faces and meet some new people. Wishing you great help. Keep going. You've got this. Bye for now.